1958. Bradwell Quay, the coast of Essex. On the sandy beach stood a giant trailer. It was waiting for the heaviest road load in British history, a nuclear reactor heat exchanger weighing 300 tons, 92 feet long, and 22 feet in diameter. In front of the trailer stood a strange-looking truck, the Rotinoff Atlantic, green, enormous, a bizarre monster, the latest miracle of British engineering. The plan was simple. At high tide, the load would come in from the sea and roll onto the ramp. Then the Rotinoff would haul 300 tons up that terrifying 1 in 10 gradient. Pickford's Heavy Haulage, Britain's largest heavy transport company, had refused the job. Impossible, they had said. But Tom Sunter and the Rotinoff Atlantic achieved the impossible. There was a man there that day, standing beside the truck, watching proudly. George Alexander Rotinoff, a Russian immigrant, a Cambridge-educated engineer, the creator of this truck. He was smiling in the photograph, celebrating his greatest victory. On paper, this was the beginning of a brilliant future for his company. But no one knew this. Exactly 1 year later, George Rotinoff would be dead, and with him, his company. The 1950s were an age without limits. Britain had just emerged from World War II. War tanks were still standing in the streets, Sherman tanks waiting to be scrapped or dismantled. And one man began by turning those tanks into bulldozers, George Rotinoff. But George was a visionary. Breaking up tanks was not enough. He imagined bigger machines, because the world was changing. The nuclear age had begun. Bradwell, Dungeness, Sizewell. Nuclear power stations were rising along Britain's coasts, and they required colossal equipment. 300-ton reactor cores, heat exchangers, generators. The Army wanted heavy tractors to move Centurion tanks. 50 tons of tank plus 50 tons of trailer equals 100 tons. No one could handle that. Australia wanted road trains to haul cattle across endless deserts, 40-meter trailers, hundreds of cattle. There was a market. There was demand. But there was no machine. In 1952 in Calmbrook near Slough, George Rotinoff set up a small workshop, Rotinoff Motors Limited, and his goal was clear: to build the biggest heavy-haul vehicles Britain has ever seen. Just as the Pennsylvania Railroad built the gigantic S1 locomotive simply because they could, Rotinoff was not born from necessity, but from pure engineering ego. And that ego would create a perfect machine. The Rotinoff Atlantic first appeared in 1955, a monster in a 6x4 configuration, 6 wheels 4 driven, rated for 140 tons gross, powered by a Rolls-Royce C6 SFL 6-cylinder supercharged diesel. 250 horsepower. But George was not satisfied. Bigger, he said. And in 1957, the Super Atlantic was born. Under the hood lay a masterpiece of British engineering, the Rolls-Royce C8 SFL, 8 cylinders, supercharged, 16.2 liters, 335 horsepower at 2,100 RPM, 950 pound-feet of torque at 1,300 revolutions per minute. A modern heavy truck produces 400 to 500 horsepower. But in 1957, 335 horsepower was monstrous. The transmission, a 6-speed main gearbox plus a 3-speed auxiliary, 18 forward gears. Engineers designed ratios for every condition, every gradient, every load. Kirkstall 25-ton bogies, fitted with 18.00 25-inch 20-ply tires, brakes, full air system, front drums 19 by 4 inches, rear drums 19 by 7 inches, power-assisted steering, cab, 3 seats inside, plus space for 2 more men outside to manage traffic. Fuel capacity, 580 liters in twin tanks. Unladen weight, 21.7 tons. Maximum gross train weight, 200 to 330 tons. On paper, the Super Atlantic was flawless. Everything was calculated. Power, torque curves, gear ratios, braking capacity, suspension flexibility. Test day came at the Ministry of Supply's Chobham track. With 103 tons gross, the Super Atlantic climbed a 1 in 7 gradient at speed. But the engineers had forgotten one thing. Perfection on paper cannot defeat the brutal reality of the real world. And that reality was time. The 1958 Bradwell job was Rotinoff's turning point. 12 nuclear reactor heat exchangers, each weighing 300 tons. They would arrive by sea, then be hauled by road. The heaviest road transport operation Britain had ever seen. Pickfords refused. "We don't want rubber-tired trailers going into seawater," they said. But the real reason was different. They were afraid. Hauling 300 tons up a 1 in 10 ramp? Impossible. Sunter brothers showed the courage. Tom Sunter bought 200-ton bogies from Cranes of Durham and ordered a brand-new untested Rotinoff Atlantic. When the first load arrived, George was there, standing proudly beside his own truck. The trailer rolled from the sea onto the ramp. The tide was perfect. The 300-ton giant settled onto the bogies. The Rotinoff Atlantic pulled forward. The engine roared. The supercharger whistled. The Rolls-Royce V8 worked at full force, and the trailer moved. The ramp was 1 in 10. For every 10 meters forward, 1 meter up. 300 tons fighting gravity. Tires digging into the sand-asphalt mix. The engine held at 1,300 revolutions per minute, right at peak torque, and they did it. The trailer climbed the ramp, reached level ground. The Rotinoff Atlantic hauled 300 tons all the way to the power station for 1.5 miles, 2.4 kilometers, 12 runs, 12 loads, 12 victories. But behind those victories was a truth no one saw. This company depended on one man, and that man was 57 years old. And inside his heart, he carried a time bomb no one knew about. May 2nd, 1959. George Alexander Rotinoff died of a heart attack, sudden and unexpected. The Engineer magazine wrote, "We regret to record the sudden death of Mr. G.A. Rotinoff from a heart attack. He was 57. He left behind a widow and a young daughter, and a company, only 7 years old. By then, only 35 to 36 Rotinoff vehicles had ever been built. When he died, no one could take the flag. Because George Rotinoff was not just an engineer. He was the soul of the company, the man who met clients, closed deals, personally demonstrated vehicles in Switzerland and Australia. The company was sold in 1960 to Lamount Vehicle and Engineering Limited, but Lamount could not sustain it. In 1962, production stopped completely. The design rights were sold to Atkinson Vehicles. Atkinson built a few more trucks, but never used the Rotinoff name. The brand died. George's dream was buried with him. Why did Rotinoff fail? Problem 1. An extremely niche market. The Super Atlantic could haul 200 to 330 tons. But how many customers in the world needed that? The Swiss Army, 10 to 12 units. Sunter Brothers, 1 unit. Veste Brothers in Australia, 2 units. That was all. Most haulage companies move 40 to 50 tons. To them, Rotinoff was overkill. Problem 2. Extremely expensive Rolls-Royce engine, custom transmission, Kirkstall axles, everything built to order. No mass production, astronomical costs. Exact prices are unknown, but a normal heavy truck costs £3,000 to £5,000. A Rotinoff likely costs £15,000 to £20,000, 3 to 4 times more. Problem 3. A maintenance nightmare Rolls-Royce engine? Only Rolls-Royce could service it. Kirkstall axles? Spares were nearly impossible to find. 18-speed transmission. A single failure could mean a month in the workshop. Other trucks use Cummins or Detroit diesel engines. Service everywhere. Parts everywhere. Problem 4. Terrible timing. The 1950s were the golden age of heavy haulage, but the 1960s were coming, and with them, containerization. Loads would become standardized. Instead of 300-ton giants, the world would move 20-ton containers. Many small loads. Rotinoff's world was about to disappear. George Rotinoff arrived too early, or too late. Like the Pennsylvania Railroad's S1 locomotive, Rotinoff was the right machine at the wrong time. How many Rotinoffs exist today? 2 in Switzerland, 1 at the Schweizerisches Militärmuseum full, 1 at the Swiss Army Historic Foundation in Bergdorf. Silent, behind ropes, waiting for 60 years, 1 in England, in the Science Museum's Rotten storage facility. Sunterbro's famous Atlantic registration RPY 767, the truck that hauled the first 300-ton load at Bradwell, now in a dusty warehouse with an information board and a photograph. 2 in Australia, at the National Transport Hall of Fame in Alice Springs. Veste Meat Company Viscount models. 1 fully restored. Memories of the Outback. Total, 5 to 6 vehicles, out of about 35 ever built. The rest, scrapped, melted, destroyed. Matchbox made a toy version of the Rotinoff Super Atlantic in the 1960s, model number 15. In 2010, one sold on eBay for £2,400. The toy had become more valuable than the real truck. And where is George Rotinoff's grave? There is no record, lost in the dusty pages of history, just like his company. But the Swiss Army Rotinoffs worked until 1991, 33 years. They hauled Centurion tanks, served throughout the Cold War, proof that George's dream was real. Sunterbroders used their Atlantic until 1974. After Bradwell, it carried dozens of nuclear loads. That truck was a legend. But the company died in 1962, just 3 years after George. Rotinoff carried the heaviest load in British history, but it lost its founder. Its moment of victory was the beginning of death. No matter how far engineering advances, there are things you can't control. Metal fatigues, bearings melt, tires burst, and people die. George Rotinoff was a Cambridge graduate, a visionary engineer. He turned Sherman tanks into bulldozers. He designed the biggest trucks Britain had ever seen. He created a monster that could haul 300 tons. But at 57, he suffered a heart attack, and everything died with him. This is like the story of the PRRS-1. It was too powerful, too fast, too expensive, and no one truly needed it. This is like the story of Ford Big Red. It was perfect, futuristic, revolutionary, but the world wasn't ready. Sometimes the greatest machines are the shortest lived, because they are too far ahead of their time, or too far behind it, or simply in the wrong place at the right time. The Rotinoff Super Atlantic could pull 330 tons, but it had no market. Creating a perfect machine is not enough. You need a system to sell it, maintain it, and operate it. And at the center of that system is a human being. When George died, the system collapsed. If you visit the museum in Switzerland, you'll see a green giant standing in a dark corner. A Rotinoff Super Atlantic. Its Centurion tank trailer is still beside it. The information board says, built in 1957, Rolls-Royce C8 SFL engine, 335 horsepower, 104-ton gross vehicle weight, used by the Swiss Army from 1958 to 1991. But the board doesn't say this. This truck was a man's dream. George Rotinoff, the son of a Russian immigrant. He came to England, founded a company, and designed a colossal truck. And then, at 57, he had a heart attack. His company died. His dream died. His name was forgotten. But the truck is still there, 65 years later. Still operational. The engine still turns. The gearbox still takes gears.